intensity and integrity of
I
the
know.
road. This is just sort of keeping it in good condition.
Well,
It's
and
not
again-
gonna show that it's below 72 or 75.
And again, this specific program is for 3 roads. In the previous slide, we talked about the CO program and the slurry program. That's the annual maintenance program where probably 30-plus segments of streets throughout town is done.
Yes?
And the reason why Atherton and Middlefield and Fair Oaks is specifically on this program is because, again, we're using federal transportation funds. Federal transportation funds are only eligible on streets that are on the federal system. And so those are the streets that qualify here in the town of Atherton, and that's why we wait until those funds are available to do those streets, so that we can maximize the use of the federal dollars that are available in the town.
Okay, here's my concern. I'm not sure, I'm all for staying ahead of the curve, because once a street deteriorates, it's a lot more expensive to fix it than it is to keep it in good repair. But when you throw together 3 streets like that, at least 2 of which I know have been done recently, and you're putting on a slurry seal all at the same time, and Atherton Avenue's been redone in pieces, and some of them as of recently as I think a year ago, it concerns me that we're just throwing money into this thing, and we're not really looking at whether or not it needs it.
Yeah, I think it's the old joke, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think, maybe we already do that, but clearly some streets deteriorate a lot faster than others. There's some streets that hardly have any traffic on them, and if they're on your plan, they probably don't need to be touched for 10 years or more.
Middlefield Road was redone in 2002.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's been 10 years.
yeah,
And it was probably due for its first slurry in 5. So it's been 10 now. We put it off knowing that this money was
Yeah.
on the way. And half the cost of doing that street is the peripherals. The detailed double yellow line with the reflectors costs almost as much as doing the road. The refresh striping that'll have to be redone and all that, it really will bring it back, to that where it was 10 years ago by doing this again.
I mean, if it needs it, my feeling is we do it, but better be careful. We don't do it. Just
Steve,
take
Atherton
it.
Avenue, has it been totally redone?
In pieces, up and down. It's been totally redone now from Alameda all the way back to Elena. Yes,
Oh, so
back to
that-
Elena in pieces. By doing this, we'll blend it all back in to one look. We've never
Be it from
done-
Elena to El Camino, it doesn't need a major reconstruction or overlay or anything like that?
Yes,
It does?
it does, but it's getting some patches in the patching. And we'll patch it up once again prior to doing this STP project.
And that isn't scheduled for any major work, that part of Atherton Avenue? So what I'm saying is we're not covering it up and then we're gonna be taking it apart 2 years later?
Well,
That piece
it's got a new water line and it's got a new sewer line
Uh-huh.
recently in the last 3 years.
Mhm.
So, no, we should not, barring an emergency, have to do that.
And when was Fair Oaks redone?
Fair Oaks was slurried, I want to say, between 3 and 4 years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't
And
that
this is
long
still,
ago.
and this is still 2 years out, so,
So maybe fair.
and that's a heavily traveled street.
But council's comments are very well noted. I mean, even though we have a pavement management program that tells us and guides us on which streets should be redone when, staff always goes out, takes a look at those streets to confirm. And so, and so we do field verify, we just don't rely totally on what the computer program is saying. And if in future years, we find that we don't need to spend $350,000 on pavement resurfacing, well, we won't. So it is something that it's, staff uses a lot of judgment. And also, the other thing that goes into this is prior to us doing any of this work, we do a lot of coordination with utility companies, because the goal is to have them go in and put in their utility replacements before we go in and we do our street improvements.
Thank you.
The next project is the Upper Atherton Channel Monitoring Phase 2. And as you know, we recently completed the Upper Atherton Channel project in December of 2011. But as part of that, as part of our permit requirements, we have a 10-year monitoring period that we need to do. And so that's what this funding is, $10,000 a year for that monitoring.
How long do we have to monitor? We're almost done with the frog. How much longer we're done with it? How much longer for the rat?
We have to do monitoring for 10 years.
10 years.
So we're paying somebody to go out there periodically,
What's it?
Yes.
$10,000, that's a great contract.
Yeah,
I'll
to
go
go
do
out.
that for half the price.
Maybe we can put some of the kids' BB guns.
The next,
This is being recorded too.
I don't think they picked that
All
up.
right, next, library, next.
the next project is a library project. You know, please note on this, these are estimates. What we're proposing in fiscal year 2012-13 is funding we think we're going to need for the project manager who we recently hired and the project architect. And then with the following year, dollars for construction, you know, with the caveat that we don't really know what the cost is yet. But basically, these are the dollars that are currently available in the library fund. So that's why we're showing it this way. But it's subject to change.
On the next one, Mike, you know, we are members of the Peninsula Traffic Congestion Relief Alliance, and actually our vice mayor is on the board now. They actually provide money to communities and to companies to start doing things about encouraging bike to work and bike paths and things like that. And I would suggest that we consider asking them for some money. So it's just both for, you know, for doing our master plan and doing some bike path things. So I just offer that as a suggestion. That's another perhaps unanticipated potential funding source.
Correct.
Okay,
We will definitely do that.
thanks.
The next project is Town Center Facility Plan and Repairs. This project will provide necessary funding to review the existing condition of the town administration offices. Funding will be used to perform condition assessments and to identify and provide recommendations for repair and replacement of existing facilities. Funding will also be used to repair and replace facilities as directed by the city council. So really what we're saying here is that, and again, we don't have a cost for what this would cost, other than knowing that we have some very deficient facilities. And so what we want to do is really do a good assessment and then come up with recommendations on repair and replacement. You know, given that there also is the work of the Town Center Task Force moving forward. And so, you know, once we do the assessment, we'll come up with some plans and recommendations, bring that back to council, you know, for any recommendations of improvements for this year.
Well, if I could just make a quick suggestion. We know that this building that we're currently sitting in is not included in the Town Center Task Force. We know that this building has been designated, identified to be seismically unsafe. We know that members of the community sit in this meeting space on a regular basis, including all the council members. When are we planning on doing anything with regards to doing a seismic upgrade to these facilities that are historically to be preserved?
We need to be careful about how we couch the status of this building. It has never been deemed seismically unsafe. It has been, the report says, it doesn't meet current standards for seismic safety. We had an engineer come in, there is a difference, and it's not just a difference, you know, a distinction without a difference. It's a true difference. If it were truly deficient, there would be a red tag on the front door, we wouldn't be sitting here. The fact is, this building is not deemed to be unsafe right now, it just doesn't meet modern standards, and there is a difference there. And so, it is something that we've talked about at the staff level, that they're looking at, but it's a good point, because at some point in time, if left to its own ends, it will become deficient. And it's something that we ought to anticipate rather than just ignore.
I think, at the risk of creating our own liability, but I think it's an important enough situation that I'll say it. if we've moved our emergency headquarters in the event of an earthquake out of this building, which we've done, over to the corporation yard center new building, which we've done, clearly, they didn't think it was gonna do too well in an earthquake, because they didn't wanna stay here. So I think that tells us enough. That says it all. If they don't want an emergency headquarters here, because they don't think the building's gonna be standing, we don't wanna be in it if there's an earthquake, or have any of the residents.
So my point is that we should put some money in for doing
I feel like
something.
I like to have this table here so that I can get under it, under any earthquake.
Also for bullets, too.
Yeah, right.
Okay, all right. That was my only point, Mike, is I think that we should probably start making an investment in this historically designated facility so that it stays available.
But also adding to that, I mean, there's a lot we should do to this facility that's not associated with its safety. You know, this is not a facility that compares to some of the other town halls. I mean, even having the screen over here makes it very difficult for people to know what's going on half of the time, unless they happen to be sitting in the right place. So I think we should put some money into, you know, to have things where, like the other towns have voting machines and
Upgrade, remodel.
a few other pieces that would make it easier for the residents to know what we're doing, even if we don't all the time.
Yeah, I like the water stain painted.
If it is, you know, clear direction for council that you would like to have us take a look and have someone assess it, I think the first step is to assess it from a structural seismic standpoint and take a look at what those recommendations are and what those costs are. And then based on that, then move on to if you want to do other improvements.
Well, there was a study of earthquake study of this building from a structural.
It was done.
It was done, but that only identified, again, as the city attorney indicated, that it does not meet current standards. That's a different question than what do you need to do to bring it up to current
So the
standards?
question would be, what would it be to bring it up to standard?
Correct, that's correct.
So, you know, because the study was done by, well, I don't know, there was an original study, and then I think that one of Interwest people came through and said something similar about.
No, all we did was we reviewed it and came to the same conclusion as what the city attorney cited, is that, you know, they didn't say that this building needs to be red tagged. All they said was it does not meet current seismic standards, which quite frankly, a lot of public buildings don't.
But
I think we
there
also-
was something more to it, Mike, because we determined not to make some of the repairs that, someone made some suggestions as to what needed to be done. It was before you were here, because we did do some things. We
Some of the
put
things were
screens on the windows that they said had to be,
They fastened the roof tiles.
yes, and they fastened some of the tiles on the rooftops. There were some things that, it was more to it than just saying it doesn't meet safety standards. Same with the library. It gave a dollar amount as to what would be required to upgrade it and what was specifically wrong with it. I remember seeing the report.
Yeah, it was around under $500,000 that they estimated it would cost to bring this building
We'll
up.
give up our salaries for it.
No, Mr. Mayor, just so we're clear, staff looked at it about a year ago. And we looked at it from the perspective of, is it enough of an issue right now to close this facility now? We take that very seriously. And when we looked at it and went back and looked at the report and brought in the Interwest guy, who I believe is an engineer,
He's a structural engineer, former building official.
and he looked at it and he said, look, I cannot tell you that it's unsafe. I do not use that word. I would not, if it were unsafe, I would tell you and you guys would be out of it. And so we looked at it from the perspective of it's usable, as is the library. The question is it something worth looking at? And I think, you know, I think the council's correct. It's worth looking at in the long run, because buildings just get weaker over time, and that's just the way it is. And we haven't seen the big one, whatever that means. According, you know, to the experts, Loma Prieta wasn't the big one. The 1906 wasn't the big one. So in that case, it probably wouldn't matter what we did, but it certainly is worth looking at. But in the meantime, You know, the lawyers get, I think Kathy brushed around it, we get worried because everything we say negative about safety, seismic safety especially, it's a zero-sum game. I mean, the bottom line is, if we put $1 million in and make this building incredibly structurally strong, that doesn't mean it's going to be safe if the earthquake is big enough.
Yeah.
And so we're always worried about raising fears beyond what a reasonable person would say. This building is right now reasonably safe. Or the mayor and I would be standing outside talking to you because I think that's a very clear statement.
But I think that from what I've read, you know, with the building rules now, it's supposed to be, buildings are supposed to be made safe up to an earthquake of, I think, 9.2. And therefore, you know, that's a pretty big earthquake, actually.
Huge.
Okay, all right.
And then the final project that we have as part of our CIP is a park master plan.
Okay.
This project will provide an update and expansion to the current park landscape master plan. Items to be addressed could include a short and long-term look at current uses and facilities, utilization of land and spaces, primary customers and activities the park should serve, policy recommendations regarding programs, uses, and fees, and business strategies to create sustainable funding for future maintenance and repairs.
Now, that would be for hiring a consultant to do that work?
We would, yes, we would want to hire a professional to do that.
Yes. And an RFP would go out for it?
Yes, an RFP would be developed,
And that's forecast for this coming year?
yes.
Okay. Could I request that we see that RFP?
You will know. The new purchasing ordinance requires it.
Good.
Next slide, please. So just 2 more slides, and this is really just a pie chart showing of the CIP that I just went through, and where the funding is coming from. And again, this is only for fiscal year 2012-13. So the CIP that I just went through proposes funding or expenditure of $2.68 million. And as you can see from this chart, most of the money, I can't read it myself, it looks like about 84% of the funding comes from parcel tax and the library fund. And then another 8.4 from road construction. So you can see that the primary funding sources for this proposed CIP is your parcel tax, the Atherton Library Fund, and the road construction.
This is a considerably lower capital improvement budget than what we've had in past years, is it not?
I don't know.
This is just 1 year. Well, I thought usually our capital improvement budgets were around $5 million.
Per year, I don't think so. But we can go back and get some of the historical information.
I'm just wondering if we're spending a lot less on roads and drainage in particular because of things like the road impact fee no longer being there and some other funding sources.
No, and again, and as council already commented, I mean, we are, you know, basically what we put together was a CIP based on what our belief of the needs were. And, you know, other than the marsh wall, you know, if you kind of look back over the last couple of years, you've accomplished a couple of significant projects from a capital improvement standpoint. One was the Fletcher Ridge View project, the other one was the Upper Atherton Chain. And so now the one left that, you know, that we see is the Marsh Road Wall. So.
What's happening with, as far as a potential project, what is happening with, and not to get into the whole Redwood City El Camino interchange, but there was some major drainage that was adversely affecting at least one homeowner on El Camino up there near Atherton Avenue, to the point that they had lost their house. Oh, you don't know? It actually was, it's the woman who's a doctor, her home, they couldn't live in it. It became uninhabitable because the water was actually up to the front and it deteriorated the front posts and they couldn't get in. It was all off of El Camino. Part of it was believed to be due to the many years of overlay, which had created basically a pooling effect on her property. you're not aware of all of that.
I
She
know.
wrote lots and lots of times to the town and could no longer live in the house. The house was going to have to be demolished to be able to live in it. Okay.
Next slide, please. And this final slide is just another cut at the pie. Basically, what this is showing is what projects are being funded with your $2.68 million. And as you can see, the primary projects are, combine the library and the marsh wall. Again, I'm hard to see, but it looks like it's about, is that 84%, 85%?
33 and 31.7.
Okay, so about 65% of your CIP is for the library Marshall wall.
We've got to understand what we're doing on Marsh Road, right?
Right, it's from a funding standpoint. Yeah, we
Because that's a lot of money.
currently, you're absolutely correct. This is from a funding standpoint. We have not defined the improvements at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, that was very thorough.
Thank you, very, very good.
Well, the staff definitely appreciates all the comments. We needed to bring the CIP to you so that we can bring it forward to the planning commission, where they make a determination that these projects confirm or, that they comply with the general plan. That's correct. So that'll be going to the next planning commission meeting. And we'll incorporate this information into the budget that will come back to council at the May regular meeting.
And although the CIP won't reflect it, we will be seeking alternative, other grants. And so if we're successful, we'll be bringing those back during the course of the year, and we'll be adding those dollars to the budget.
And if you could send me an email so I don't have to dig out my old budgets as to what the capital improvement budgets were in other years.
We'll go back 5 years and we'll kind of take
Thanks.
a look at it for the last 5 years.
I know part of it was, it constantly rolled over, like Fletcher, with the problem that they had. They rolled over that $1 million, and then there's $1 million right there, but just so I learned something.
And I believe all the previous operating budgets did have a capital improvement component, so that's what we'll do. We'll just go back to those operating budgets.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I will briefly go over some of the general fund revenue projections as of now. Developing the budget, I know we want to see how much money do we have. I know Councilmember Dobby is always clear about that. How much money do we have? And then you can decide how much you have to spend. So we've been working on some revenue projections. We don't see much significant growth in this next year, but we don't see a decline either. So just looking at the general fund pie, to cover 90% of the revenue, you can look at property tax, sales and use tax, franchise fees, and building revenue. So those are the ones I'm going to just focus on today.
Could I just mention again, as I mentioned before, that did we ever find out if the property tax that we get is the right number?
That is something that I've been working on. Councilmember Dobby has asked me to kind of do a preliminary audit, and with talking with the controller, they're really not very helpful in providing us with kind of a historical assessment of the calculation. He can point me to the last couple of years and what their calculation is. So I've been talking with our auditors a little bit to see if we can get there are certain audit firms that do this for a living, so I want to see what is their practice of looking back and seeing. Going back to when the base year was created on Prop 13 is kind of really the way to test it. So I'm continuing to work on that.
I think we need to really have a good look at this and make it a fairly high priority, because the Finance Committee especially, to some extent, thinks we're getting screwed by the county, and that we should be getting a lot more. Now, that may or may not be true, but I think when the residents ask, we need to be certain that we're being treated properly.
I believe the audit committee has discussed this, and so I will bring an item to the audit committee at their next meeting.
Well, can we find out what it would cost to perform an audit up there and then send a notice of intent to audit to the county?
Sure.
So that perhaps they might be a little bit more forthcoming.
What is it exactly is the audit that you're looking for?
We want to verify how much money we're paying in as a town to the county coffers, and then verify that we're getting our fair share back.
This is I guess tangential, but it hits on that issue. 2 years ago, the same company that does our, collects our business license fee.
Community services?
Yes, Muni Services. Muni Services offered a proposal, and you weren't on the council at the time, where they would basically look at individuals' property tax. If you could just send that to Bill, the old Muni proposal.
If I can find that, but
It was a
I
wonderful
plan on
proposal.
getting.
It didn't pass council, but take a look at
But
it.
it wasn't, it was for a different,
Oh, it was for individuals,
For
it wasn't for the
different
town.
but this
But they
way,
claimed that it was on a cost basis,
yeah,
and in, where they had done it, they brought in a lot of extra money into the
Yeah.
town.
I agree. And
There's
and I
two
think that's
firms.
fine, but I think also, the one I'm talking about is we give the county over $60 million in property taxes, and we get back less than 10.
Yes.
And if you look at every one of your property tax bills, it says that the cities get 17.3% off their property tax. Well, maybe they do, but we don't. And then when I questioned them before you got into it, they said, yeah, but that's right, but then we divide it up. It doesn't mean that every city gets 17.3%, it just means that some get more, some get less. Well, I'd rather be in the more side than the less side.
So if you could just circulate, at least to the members of the finance committee, that Muni Services proposal and have them take a look at it.
If I can find that one, I will. But
Teresa said she has it.
I plan on getting a proposal from Muni Services and from HDL, who also is a company that does the same thing.
Oh, yeah, we have a meeting tomorrow.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Potentially.
Thanks.
So here's some trends of our property tax revenue. It's broken down. Part of the reason why property tax is more complicated because it's not only Prop 13 and Prop 8, it's also all these things that the state does with ERAF, property tax in lieu, which was the trading of the VLF money. And then also we've kind of consistently reported real property transfer tax along with our property tax subtotal. That is a separate tax that when we do look on revenue enhancements, we'll want to pull that out and really analyze that separately. But historically, we've kind of included it in our property tax numbers. So we're looking at about 6.9 million for next year. That's about 3% growth. Right now, the county average for the growth in this assessed value year is about 2.95 overall. The town of Atherton's growth is showing right now at 6.4. So that means that they develop the pie of what's available, and then, our percent is broken down, and so our growth is greater than countywide, so it appears that we would be receiving our portion of the pie, I guess, is how, it's the 17% that Councilmember Dobby spoke about is then divided up amongst all the jurisdictions within the city grouping, which are, sometimes include special districts. So, the ERAF portion of that is about $650,000. That's the part we're really watching for next year. The assessor and the controller say that they do believe that we will still receive that, but that $650,000 may go away based on the formula that's used to pay for school districts. And you can see here that between 2008 and 9, there's about a 3% growth. Then we jumped to 10%. Then there was a decline for 2 years in a row of about 1%, and I'm showing just about 3% growth in this year. So it's pretty flat, and so there's room for improvement in there with all the new development that goes on. Building revenue, again, you can see it's up and down. It really is based on what projects are going on in town. It's really not very consistent, but we've kind of just developed projections predicting 2% growth from last year, and last year we already amended at mid-year by kind of showing about a 30 to 40% growth in the revenue stream. So I think this is pretty generous projections in the building revenue side. We're anticipating that things are picking up, and we'll be continuing to see some development activity in the town. So that's about $1.3 million total. And then franchise revenue is about 7% of our budget. It's broken down into the categories of utilities, which is gas and electric, the water department or the water company, solid waste, garbage, and cable collections. Water grew quite a bit last year, so I'm not showing any growth in that area. Utilities continues, when they have rate increases, that continues to grow slightly. And then solid waste, we're still seeing some growth, so I put in a 4% growth there and a small bit of increase in the cable area. just
I would
because the
think that,
economy-
if I could interrupt, I think the solid waste
Mhm.
seems to be a little low. We've essentially doubled everyone's trash rate here in town over the last year. And I don't see a 100% improvement on the chart you're showing from 2010, 2011.
I
I
will,
see a 50%, I would think it would be another 50%.
right, within what we increased at mid-year, and then again in this small, we increased it by about 30%, and then another 4%. I will look at that and
Yeah,
refine that.
because that number looks
Absolutely.
low to me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree.
Okay, great. And then the last one is not a very big chunk of our money, the sales and use tax portion. Last year, we budgeted 110,000, which we think it's gonna come in at about 165,000, just because there was a one-time, well, I'll call it one time, but anytime a resident does maybe purchase something from out of state that's significant, they're responsible for paying use tax to the state on that, and that can come to us once in a while. There appears to be a big one-time receipt of that type of fund this year, which I've taken out for next year's projections. That's why it looks like it's going down, but it's an overall 4% growth in our sales and use tax.
How does the Circus Club, how do we handle the Circus Club as far as sales taxes go?
I'm not certain of.
Because you know,
how
they
they're
have
paying
all
sales
big
tax.
events there. And I'm
Sales
sure-
tax is only charged on retail sales. So if there's food sales there, we would receive sales tax on that.
There was a
Or-
question about the sales of horses, that sometimes, and I don't know, there was an issue years ago about that horses at their tally-ho are sold, and that sometimes it can be millions of dollars, and that there is a tax on that, and were we collecting it? I don't know if any of that's true, but supposedly we were gonna look, not you, our finance people were gonna look into it.
I will absolutely look into that. I didn't know about that.
Plus, if they have a big event, they charge the person sales tax on it. I mean, if they have a big lunch or when you get, I'm sure when you get your bill there, that sales tax is part of it, like, isn't any restaurant?
Correct. The sale of food, prepared food,
So,
there is sales tax on
Shouldn't we get a piece of that?
it. I'll report back to you on what we get from the service club.
Perhaps we
Because
should-
I think maybe we need an audit there, because, you know, they do a lot, big events and everything else, and I'm sure that we should get a piece of it if they're charging people.
Well, perhaps we should look into understanding if we should make our own sales tax.
And they,
Ticket sales?
I think a utility user's tax would be a much better tax for us.
Absolutely.
Just last year.
That's another good point.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, that is essentially a non-starter in virtually every city. At a point in time, somebody gets the idea, let's collect our own sales tax. And the bottom line is, it's legally difficult to do, and it's incredibly expensive, and they did it on purpose that way so that the state really ultimately ends up doing it cheaper, but keeping some of the money. So we can look at it, but I can tell you now, having suffered through it, it's really, it's like drilling a dry well. It's just not gonna work.
But Councilmember Carlson also says, you know, that the new Menlo Atherton Theater there, the high school, they fill it a lot, and they sell tickets. And tickets, I'm sure, have tax, no?
Yeah, not from the
There's
school,
no-
but from the Menlo players.
There's
Tickets
no
aren't taxed.
sales tax on
Tickets.
performance tickets.
Does not?
No,
Okay, well, that's a non-starter.
yeah,
Okay, well, let's look into the horse sales.
absolutely, absolutely.
That's a good.
So then there's another category of kind of the less than 2% of our sales tax. That includes business license revenue, which I haven't projected an increase in. Zoning and planning fees, we're not really projecting much more than 2% increase. And then encroachment permits, they seem to have some growth, so I put that as a slide just to see the historical trends there. And so we're projecting about So that's that's about 90% of our general fund revenue. If you didn't have any questions on revenue, I'm gonna continue to refine them. I wanted to just show you a quick picture of our fund balance trends, to see where we are. So with preparing the budget, of course, we want to take the goals that you've put forth and develop our expenditure budgets, match them with revenues, and then these are the trends of how our fund balances have been looking over the last few years. The council adopted a new fund balance policy last year, which set aside, I believe there's a 15% emergency reserve that is designated. And then the building department money that's, the revenue that's been collected that hasn't really been, we haven't earned that revenue yet, that's set aside under the building category. And then in the council's fund balance policy, you said you never want the unassigned amount to go below 20%. So I put that in as the purple color there. That's kind of the 20% cushion. And then you can see above that is the true unassigned, unencumbered amount of fund balance, which has been getting smaller over time, as Councilmember Robbie talked about. So that's kind of the picture of what the trend is and how we want to stop that downward trend.
The trend is in the wrong direction.
It is in the wrong direction, so.
So, are we getting these charts sent us electronically?
Yes, we can send that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So that concludes my presentation for today. As you know, at our next regular meeting, May 16th, we'll introduce the entire budget. It'll be very general fund focused, and the special funds will be covered as well. Since we went over the CIP today, we won't be going over the details of that, but it will be included in your budget document. And then we'll be bringing it back for council approval on June 20th.
It's very good.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yes,
very much.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Mike, also.
Okay, so with that, can we have a motion to adjourn? That concludes our regular schedule.
So moved.
Fine. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.